Hello, and welcome to this Australia-New Zealand Women's Declaration International webinar for March 2024. My name is Janet Fraser, coming to you from Gundungurra, west of Sydney. I am the convener of the Feminist Legal Clinic in Exile. Tonight I have our Principal Solicitor Anna Kerr and Bronwyn Williams from the Feminist Legal Clinic doing tech with me, and Janet from New Zealand also here in the background. Wherever you're coming from this evening, we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, but particularly the women of this continent. We have three speakers tonight whom I'll introduce in turn. Bronwyn Winter and Gina are the national co-conveners of the Australian Feminists for Women's Rights, which they co-founded in 2022 to be an openly left-wing, radical, feminist group lobbying for women's sex-based rights. They were sick of the political right appropriating the issue of gender identity ideology and the political left dismissing any concerns as those of right-wing bigots. The gender issue is not the only one they are concerned about, but is taking up almost all of their time since they started. They have produced a lot of research and many submissions since they started up, and the open letter to the Australian Human Rights Commission they're talking about this evening is one of their ongoing projects. Professor Emerita Bronwyn Winter has been a radical lesbian feminist activist for over 5 decades in Australia, France, and transnationally. Her day job for many years was at the University of Sydney. Among many other publications, she co-edited with Susan Hawthorne the first international feminist anthology on 9/11 and the so-called War on Terror. Gina is a left feminist who has spent most of her life in the union movement representing workers in health and emergency services sectors. She is currently a politically homeless ALP member, but maintains her membership, so it seems, purely to retain the opportunity to make other ALP members listen to her about gender identity. Something that angers her more than the ideological capture is the fact our work to defeat it takes our energies away from the appalling rate of murder women are facing in Australia. Gina currently works in workplace relations. Jessica Williams lives in Victoria on the lands of the Bunurong and Warrawurrung people. She is an author, researcher, lobbyist, and activist. Jess is the director of Single Sex Prisons Australia and the International Network for Incarcerated Girls and Women. She staunchly defends the rights of all women with a focus on advocacy for women prisoners. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. And I would like to turn over to Gina and Bronwyn to start off.
Thanks, Janet. We have some pictures for you to look at. We'll send it to Janet as a PDF because it's too much to read. It's just more of a guide as to what we're talking about. And I'll share that now, and Gina's kicking off.
Thanks, Janet, for your introduction. And hello, everybody. It's really exciting to speak to people all around the world. I think Jessica will speak a bit more about this, but we have just come from a Let Women Speak rally in Melbourne today, so big day. So I'm just going to do a little introduction of our organisation, and Bronwyn's going to speak a little bit more about particularly the current project with the AHRC. So the Australian Feminists for Women's Rights was established after, I guess, Bronwyn and I, shared. I think we've got an automatic scrolling going on. Thanks.
That was probably me.
Bronwyn and I, that's okay. With Bronwyn and I sort of sharing our frustration at, I guess, a lot of the commentary regarding the ideology being hijacked by the right of politics and how damaging that felt to us as feminists and left feminists, and also the compromises that came from the movement being drawn into spaces that are often associated with or controlled by right-wing groups or ideologies. So we did. I can see that there's questions coming up. Maybe we can. I'm not sure if Janet, we would normally respond to questions during the presentation. Maybe at the Q&A afterwards, we would do that. Great. So, yeah, Bronwyn and I set about sort of finding like-minded left-wing radical feminists who were interested in and had energy to become involved in what we really wanted to focus on as being political advocacy, knowing that because the left is predominantly a strength in the gender ideology space, that we really needed to find a way to change the narratives, to have proper discussions, informed discussions, for those discussions to even be able to occur, which we haven't obviously. Can you go back to the previous slide, Bronwyn? We haven't been able to achieve, but we're still working on it. So that was the purpose of our initiating the group. So I just want to make sure I sort of touched on everything. And yeah, as Bronwyn's mentioned in the slide there, that we do have a focus on women's rights more broadly, but yes, our time does get very much taken up at the moment with gender ideology work, which seems to be inevitable. We really can't sort of move on from it to achieve other things at this point. So what we have, we should have a link to our website here, which you'll see if you go to it. We have a number of projects that we are working on. We've put together a detransitioner project after having some meetings with the UN Special Rapporteur for violence against women and girls, Reem Al Salam, and we are putting together, gathering testimonies from Australian women and girls affected. Thanks. That's it. We're currently working on the AHRC project, which Bronwyn will explain in more detail to you. We have also been working a lot on the New South Wales introduction of sex self-ID and conversion therapy legislation. So you will see on our website, if you have a look at it, we've also done a number of submissions, particularly what we started off with was what we call our myth-busting document. And it collated a list of, I think we ended up with 12 common myths regarding gender identity that really are problematic in terms of people understanding what has occurred, what is occurring, the facts behind the narrative and behind the tropes. We've had some really great feedback from that document. Its purpose is to be able to, for people to be able to use it to inform themselves, but also to inform others, particularly in Australia, to be able to send it to politicians. As it says in the slide, we sent it to many politicians, federal politicians, particularly given the Sex Discrimination Act that enables a lot of the ideology to thrive in this country, has had some amendments to it to remove the definitions of woman and man. So that's really problematic. We need to focus on our federal politicians to address that. That's something that we need to move into that space a bit more. But so, yeah, that's one of the really great pieces of work that we've put together, the myth-busting dossier. Additionally, we do tend to spend a lot of time putting together submissions, and you will see on our website a long list of submissions that we have made, some of them solely from a forward and some of them in combination with other organisations. So, yeah, that's a little bit about us, but probably more interestingly, Bronwyn's going to go into our AHRC project. We're a small group at this point. I'll just mention we are at the point of starting to go through the process to become incorporated, and then we'll be opening up to membership. And yeah, we've sort of consolidated our core now. We're getting a little bit more effective, and the AHRC project's been a really great opportunity to, I guess, build our platform as well as do some good work. So yeah, I'll hand over to Bronwyn.
Thanks, Gina. Okay, so probably most of you have seen this. Every person among my sort of friendship and my sort of broader networks that has looked at this thing, the first reaction was, this is a witch hunt. And that is exactly what we thought too. The visual that accompanies it on their website is worth commentary, because they're talking about being diverse and inclusive. Now, just have a look at that picture. You've got stereotypically male people taller at the back and stereotypically female people shorter at the front, including the spaghetti straps and with the badge on the tit and the hand on the hip in a girly pose. So the sort of stereotypes they're coming out with are quite extraordinary. The badges are basically the trans networks identified badges. You know, they've invented all these badges. They've invented a flag for lesbians that no lesbian I have ever met has ever used. But they invented all these things. They've got the rainbow, they've got the trans colors, and the other one is for non-binaries. So Blondie in the front with her shirt hanging out and the redhead in the back, they are apparently non-binaries, and we have the trans and so on. But the normativity of that image is something I find quite extraordinary. Anyway, that was a little parenthetical comment. Moving on. So this is, the slides will be published somewhere. I'll send a PDF for Janet and we go up on the website with the video. But you've probably seen they're really targeting this. They've assumed there are all these threats to transgender and gender diverse people, whatever the hell that means. And it's sort of news to us because we are very much under threat, as those women who are at the Melbourne rally today are keenly aware from the violence they encountered. And fortunately, this year, the police did their bloody job and protected them. So we've got all these sorts of things, housing, migration, employment, so on. Everyone's facing problems in employment. We know who it is. So this seemed to us like a setup, like they've already sort of decided what the outcome is, and they've decided there are all these threats, and we're wondering what evidence they are basing that on. So we had this little idea. We said, okay, let's see if we could get together an open letter and buy a page of advertising space to publish it. Now, that is a big deal. It costs almost $15,000 to buy a one-page ad in the Sydney Morning Herald print edition and the online version for subscribers, like the digital copy of the print edition. It costs almost 15,000 Australian dollars to have that done in the middle of the paper on a weekday. So that was a lot of money to raise because we couldn't crowdfund for the most obvious reasons, because we would have got shut down in 2 seconds. So all the fundraising had to happen very discreetly through email contacts, through word of mouth, etc. I am absolutely blown away by the trust and goodwill that went into the fundraising effort. We raised the money very quickly. We were able to book the ad in on the 6th of March, which was just over 2 weeks ago. And the next slide will show you the ad. I've cut it in two so it all gets in. So this is what we got. And we were reaching out for signatories, and we had so much discussion within a forum and with a number of other groups also about who would sign. We wanted to be a little bit sort of multi-partisan this time, but maybe not going too far to the right either. So we've got some more socially conservative groups such as Women's Forum signing, but we decided to draw the line at Australian Christian Lobby, mainly because of their extremely homophobic statements and so on. So that was who would sign, what order they would sign in was a subject of considerable discussion, both within a forum and with some of the other signatories. So it was an absolutely mammoth thing to pull together. We're extremely proud we pulled it off. I'm still astonished we pulled it off, but it just proves that there is a lot of energy to want to do something very public. because we're getting so frustrated. You've seen all the submissions we've done. We're not the only people who've done submissions. We've been lobbying pollies. We've been writing submissions in the New South Wales campaign group, and we can do I was going to talk about that, and then this came up, but maybe next month we can talk about the New South Wales campaign with some of the other members of that campaign, because that has been a singularly depressing experience. We thought we were going to get somewhere, and then we basically got shafted at the last minute, as you probably heard. So that level of frustration has become so intense that we thought we've got to do something big and public. So that's what we did. We were very pleased to get people like Clive Hamilton, who used to run the Australian Institute, has a lot of street cred among the intellectual left in Australia. He also published a great op-ed in the SMH last year telling the woke lefties to wake the hell up, which was a great op-ed. And he looked at our myth-busting dossier and said, that's an excellent dossier, of course I'll sign. So, it was like straight away. One of the four women got in touch with Richard Dawkins. He said, yes, of course I'll sign. And so on and so forth. So we managed to get onto some quite, Julie Bindle immediately said she'd sign without even reading the content of the letter because she trusted us. And so you see that we have quite a large number of signatories. We had to cut a little bit out of the letter to fit it on the page, but we've actually put it back on the website in the preamble, because we've also published the letter on a parallel website, and I'll take you to that in a moment. But this was, for us, it was a very big deal. We sent a media release to a very long list of press in Australia and all the medical peak bodies. 0 reports. Also, the WPATH files broke that week too, and there's pretty much 0 reporting on that as well. The WPATH files were released the day before this ad appeared. So it was quite a big week in the gender critical, or I prefer to say gender abolitionist space, because I don't have a gender, I don't want a gender, and I don't want there to be any genders in the world. However, moving on. So that was, it was a big deal. It was a very big deal to pull that off. And the thing is that we had to, because we're not incorporated yet, as Gina pointed out, I had to set up a holding account for the money that I run. I am in complete control of that account, and people trusted us enough to pay money into that account, which is, still sitting there, and I can show the details, blacking out names to anyone who wants to see it. But it's going to pay my credit card bill, which paid for the ad in a few days' time. So we're still very proud of it. We've had a lot of excellent feedback. It's brought us, we're getting retweeted on the socials about it, and so on and so forth. So and what is also really good news is that the parallel website we set up, and that little bit with the dot points is the bit we had to cut out of the letter because we just didn't have room. So we stuck it back in on the website. So we've invited people who didn't make it into the ad, or who weren't able to make it into the ad because of, needing to be discreet or have a pseudonym or whatever. In terms of the ad, we did want to have groups going first, and the groups were all listed alphabetically. I'll just take you back to the signatories. The groups are all listed alphabetically. After the groups, we put the health professionals. After the health professionals, we put people who would have clout. So we put the academics, the professors, and so on and so forth. I just happened to be there with Clive Hamilton and Richard Dawkins because my name fit on the line and Madeline Beekman's didn't. And that's the only reason that happened. And then we had, various other people, various other activists, journalists. We have Helen Joyce signed, and who was very appreciative of being asked, by the way, and various individuals who wanted their names to be there. So that was, and that was a difficult conversation too. Who signs? What's the order of signing? Who do we have in? Who do we have out? And so there was some debate about that as well. It wasn't easy. So we have hundreds of signatories on that website. You've got the URL there. For some reason, when we send that URL in an email, it's getting blocked by some ISPs. We're not quite sure why. It's a standalone website. It doesn't depend on a forward. We set up a completely separate website for this project. It was a one-page website. And but for some reason, servers like BigPond and so on, if you actually put that URL in an email or an attachment to an email, it gets bounced. So when I put the URL in an email, I now put www.dot in capitals, Equality for Human Rights, DOT in capitals, org, so that it doesn't get blocked because people, for some reason, weren't receiving the emails. I don't know if somebody maliciously reported it as malicious. That's quite possible. But anyway, so we've had a bit of a problem. We haven't got to the bottom of that one. However, there are hundreds of signatories. I'm not going to put all them up on a slide, but you can go to the website and have a look. And if you haven't signed, go ahead and sign. We've got signatories from the US, the UK, and various other places. So that's still happening. They're still signing on. The morning I composed an email that I ran by the Forward Women, and they were all happy with it. And I said, yeah, go ahead, send it off. I composed this email to the Australian Human Rights Commission. Rosalind Croucher is the president of the Human Rights Commission. Lorraine Finlay is the Human Rights Commissioner, and Anna Cody is the Sex Discrimination Commissioner. And she has pronouns. She signs she, her, just in case there was any doubt. So, and she speaks about herself in the third person, which she must think she's a 17th century French monarch because that's what they did. So this was sent at 7 a.m. in the morning of the publication. Heads up. This is coming out in the Herald today. And this is why we have been writing, we have been lobbying, we have been putting in submission. Nobody is listening to us. So we need your attention and we need it now. I quite deliberately, and Clive Hamilton actually mentioned that to me, you know, when he was talking about writing to the HRC, and he was talking about the lag thing, yeah, Lesbian Action Group who applied for an exemption under the Sex Discrimination Act that was supposed to protect us, right, to hold a women-only event. They were denied that exemption. They are now appealing. So I really wanted explicitly to mention that, to prove, to demonstrate by a very recent event that there is a conflict of rights claims, that actually women's rights are not, our freedom of association and assembly and even of expression is now being denied. So we have a direct conflict happening here. They're not separate issues. So happy to meet with you. Let's chat. Guess what we got in reply? The woman clearly thinks we can't read very well because she basically repeated what was on their website. This is what the project's about. That wasn't what my email about. I wasn't asking what the project was about. We know damn well what their project is about. So we come out completely blown off. We are now discussing within a forum. We're actually having a forum meeting coincidentally tomorrow morning, and we're going to discuss writing a reply either as a forward or possibly getting all the signatories to sign on to the reply if we can contact them all. But that's something we're going to discuss tomorrow morning. We're not going to leave it there. We're also putting in a Freedom of Information request to the Australian Human Rights Commission, asking on what basis they decided there were threats, what evidence they have for saying there were these threats, how they define these threats, the location of the threats, what made them decide to, you know, locate the threats in certain places. What is the evidence? What is the documentation to back up this project that justifies spending taxpayer money on this project? We're encouraging other people to put in Freedom of Information requests to the AHRC along similar lines. And people are also making submissions, and we're hopefully going to get to make one ourselves if we can never sort of pause for breath. So that's sort of where it's up to. Do I have any more slides to show you? Just let me see. I think that might be the last one. Oh, no, it's not the last one. It's sort of, what do we do now? What do we do now? So we're keeping the Open Letter website open. The URL is in the slides. I can put it in the chat as well. And we're going to reply. We're obviously going to publish the reply to Cody. We published our email on X. We published Anna Cody's reply on X. People are re-Xing or retweeting, or whatever you call it now. As Gina said earlier, we've really got to work on getting the Sex Discrimination Act returned to what it was for in 1984. And just to close, a little personal story that I'm very proud of. In 2004, I was invited to be one of the plenary speakers at a conference held in Brisbane to mark the 20th anniversary of the Sex Discrimination Act. And I even wrote a performance poem that I performed that evening. That evening at the conference dinner. You know, they said, do you want to do something? And I said, okay, I'll write a performance poem. So I did that. It was very well received. And I was very proud to be at that conference with such terrific feminists. It was a great conference celebrating women's struggle and what the Sex Discrimination Act was for and how much work we still needed to do 20 years down the track. And now we're another 20 years down the track. And I am mourning the death of the Sex Discrimination Act, and we've got to get it back. We've got to resuscitate it. We've got to return it to its original form and make it work for us. So that's where I'm going to stop. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gina and Bronwyn. Was there anything that you wanted to say, Gina, to finish up?
No, I've put the link to the web page to the open letter in the chat, so people can grab that from there. It's a bit easier. It's also, you can link from our website, but yeah, no, that was great. Thanks, Bronwyn.
It's marvellous. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing about how more of us can get involved and what we can do. And now over to Jessica Williams. Jess.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Anna. I know you're back there somewhere, or maybe she's already gone, I don't know, but thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here presenting tonight for the WDI Australia and New Zealand webinar. I was only able to put together a few slides for tonight, so I do apologise for the lack of the slides. I will spend some time at the end of my presentation, as it was said earlier, discussing our Women Will Speak demonstration in Melbourne, organised by Women's Action Group. But first, I was asked to discuss a man named Wayne Gregory Astle, who was found guilty in 2023 of 27 charges, which included counts of aggravated sexual assault and indecent assault, committed against women prisoners during his employment at the Dilweenia Correctional Centre in New South Wales. He was sentenced to a maximum of 27 years. The minimum he has to serve is 15 years and 4 months. These offences were made known to multiple people within the chain of command. Those complaints and concerns were suppressed. A special commission of inquiry was announced in mid-2023 by the state's corrections minister, who said he was shocked and absolutely appalled after Astle's conviction. And he ordered the review to be led by former Judge Peter McClellan. The special commission of inquiry concluded with the delivery of the final report, which came down on the 29th of February this year. The final report is 806 pages long. Please forgive me for not having been able to read all of it before I presented this evening. I would like to recite some key points from the executive summary. Before joining Corrective Services New South Wales in October 1999, Wayne Astle was a serving police officer and for a time was a detective. As his police personnel file reveals, he should never have been employed by Corrective Services New South Wales. His file contained complaints of serious criminal and other misconduct, which, apart from raising questions as to why he was not prosecuted, cast doubt on the integrity of Corrective Services New South Wales employment process. Whether corruption or incompetence was responsible for his acceptance, I cannot say. It has led to tragic consequences for both prisoners and prison officers. After serving for a time at Parklea Correctional Centre, Astle was transferred to the Dilweenia Correctional Centre, an all-female facility. He was there from February 2009 until his arrest on February 20th, 2019. When at Dilweenia, he served as a senior correctional officer and at times acted as chief correctional officer. Astle's offending took place over a period of almost 5 years. He has been convicted of offending against 14 inmates, and there may be others. It is impossible to believe that, given the acknowledgement by some correctional officers that rumors were abundant, that a majority of correctional officers and a great many inmates would not have been aware that Astle may be up to no good. Instead of investigating the rumors, the management of the jail sought to suppress them at multiple levels. In many cases, the available evidence was more than rumors. A small number of correctional officers were prominent in attempting to have management address the problems, but without success. failure by some senior staff members and management to competently and respectfully deal with the complaints made by officers and inmates alike resulted in many staff concluding that reporting was pointless. Inmates rightfully understood that they would not be believed by those in management when making a report of serious misconduct by an officer and feared the consequences of doing so. Astle was a domineering personality in the jail, making it difficult for both inmates and officers to complain about his behavior. They feared retribution. This is not to say that some complaints originating from inside the jail did not find their way to the appropriate unit internal to Corrective Services New South Wales, but outside of the jail. Some did. However, the system for their management was not fit for purpose, and so it seems the resources given to the investigations branch were totally inadequate. Only one word is appropriate to describe the situation in the investigations branch: hopeless. It seems for a period, no intelligence report that had been referred to IB was processed at all. In all, 6 intelligence reports were sent from Dilwenia to the investigations branch prior to Astle's arrest. However, no investigation or referral was initiated. This is only 4 paragraphs of a 7-page executive summary, and already the extent of the failures of women prisoners is clear on numerous levels, and it just gets worse. On October 2023, an article from Tasman Rose with The Guardian highlighted findings from the inquiry, which revealed that the area in which Astle worked in the women's prison was lacking 500 security cameras. Manager of Technical Security at Corrective Services New South Wales, Fergal Malloy, apologies if I got that pronunciation incorrect, told the inquiry that there were almost 1,000 cameras across the Dilwenia Centre, but the vast majority were in a newly built section. The older area of the jail, where Astle worked and offended, had only 195 cameras, which was significantly below what was required, which would have been around 400 to 500. When asked why security cameras had not been operating inside the offices of prison staff, including that of Astle, he said there should have been. Anywhere we have inmates, we should have cameras, Malloy said. He said CCTV cameras were the best management tool within corrections facilities for their role in understanding what was going on within a center. When asked if the funding available at the moment was enough to make the upgrades required across the state, he said, not at present, no. This is one prison. There are approximately 24 women's prisons or prisons with women's wings in Australia. So how many imprisoned women are being raped and assaulted that we do not know about? How many instances are known but are being ignored or covered up? How many male prison officers are taking advantage of their position of authority to further torment and traumatize the most vulnerable Australian women? How many instances of harm are occurring to imprisoned women in Australia? Mothers, victims of male sexual and physical abuse, survivors of extreme trauma. Of course, this is just the tip of the iceberg. New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia, each state and territory seems to have its own dark history or patterns of neglect and abuse stemming from police and prison staff. In 2022, a landmark class action lawsuit was filed with the Supreme Court in New South Wales, alleging police unlawfully strip searched people, including children, some as young as 10 years old. New South Wales Police committed a series of unlawful acts, such as assault and battery, during those searches over a 6-year period from 2018 at the Splendor in the Grass Festival. The plaintiffs alleged some people, again, including children without the support of a parent or guardian, were told to lift or move their genitals, strip naked, and squat and cough during searches. Women were ordered to remove sanitary products so they could be inspected. This lawsuit only came after a mountain of evidence about the misuse of strip searches by police stemming from police watchdog investigations, coroner's reports, and internal police documents had failed to convince lawmakers to push for legislative change. In 2019, New South Wales police officers illegally strip searched at least 25 children at the Sydney-based Lost City Music Festival, which was for teens aged 13 to 17. In one case, a child known as GEN15C told New South Wales Law Enforcement Conduct Commission that he was strip searched by an officer who was not wearing gloves. He said the officer touched his testicles and rubbed his buttocks during the search. It is further alleged that after doing so, the officer moved around behind the boy, placed both hands inside his shorts, and ran his hands around his buttocks in a circular motion in an effort to find drugs. No drugs were found. In Tasmania, the Human Rights Law Centre obtained documents under right to information requests, which revealed that 841 strip searches of women in Tasmanian prisons took place in a 7-month period, with only 3 filling the search with concealed items turning up. The concealed items were pain medication, tobacco and a lighter, and tobacco and matchsticks. The Human Rights Law Centre says Tasmanian prison searches are conducted too frequently and not in line with international standards. Freedom of Information responses revealed that New South Wales Corrections does not record strip searches of women prisoners. The Human Rights Law Centre submitted a Freedom of Information request to Corrective Services New South Wales for the records of strip searches on women in prison between October 2020 and April 2021. In response, the agency said there are no registers or logbooks where the searches are recorded. Released in late 2020, the New South Wales Inspector of Custodial Services report into the Mary Wade Correctional Centre for Women found strip searches are rife at the centre, and the practice takes place when leaving the centre, after contact and non-contact visits, as well as at times when women have not gone anywhere or been visited. Strip searches are only recorded if something is found. And despite this being a routine practice, over 12 months ending in October 2019, no contraband had been found. So there's no record of how many women were subjected to a search for no reason other than possibly degrading them. To give everyone some sense of how many strip searches might be occurring within prisons across Australia, a 2019 report into strip searching practices into Western Australian facilities revealed that almost 900,000 strip searches were conducted on prisoners over 5 years, with only 571 contraband items found, none of which were drug or weapons related. In 2017, the Office of then Ombudsman Deborah Glass conducted an independent inspection of the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre in Victoria over 7 days. Ms. Glass said the inspection had uncovered some serious issues. She said they were particularly concerned about the routine practice of strip searching the women before and after contact visits. Ms. Glass was disappointed the Victorian Department of Justice and Regulation had not accepted her recommendation to stop the practice and instead undertake targeted strip searching when justified by intelligence or risk, which would be extremely rare. She said her office was also concerned about the high incidence of force and restraint being used at the prison, including reports of pregnant women being handcuffed when attending external medical appointments. It is crucial to understand and remember
It's okay, Jess. It's all right. It is absolutely grueling, terrible stuff. Take your time.
It is crucial to understand and remember that strip searches are experienced as sexual assault by imprisoned women, many of whom are survivors of male sexual violence and/or child molestation. The compounding trauma inflicted upon imprisoned women via strip searches and body cavity searches is lifelong. I would imagine that children also experience strip searches as a form of sexual assault, potentially one their growing brains cannot fully comprehend. In Western Australia, police casually lost 6 years' worth of sexual assault reports that were sent to an address set up to receive correspondence from sexual assault victims. This information was also revealed under Freedom of Information request. In July last year, it was revealed that anyone who attempted to report a sexual crime between February 2016 and March 2018 via an email listed on the WA Police website were sending highly sensitive reports to a ghost address not monitored by police. WA Today discovered archived web pages that suggested the email was unmonitored for at least 2 years. But until recently, WA Police had ignored repeated questions about the true length of time the administration error was in place. An internal memo obtained under FOI by WA Today revealed the address promoted to victims of sexual assault stopped receiving emails as far back as August 2012. This is just a snapshot of instances of neglect and failure to meet even the most basic human rights standards for women, especially for imprisoned women. Human rights standards for the separation of prisoners state clearly that men and women are to always be housed separately. There are further standards in the Geneva Conventions that women should have same-sex supervision. It is also very important to know that the 7 core United Nations treaties that Australia uses to form the basis for human rights standards do not have a single trace of gender identity ideology within them. The human rights standards set by the United Nations, which are accepted to my knowledge by every nation in the world but one, are not being met by any state or territory in Australia via prison policies, yet there are no politicians that seem as angry as they should be about it. This is being put in the too hard basket by far too many people, especially those that have authority or decision-making power or that have influence over people that do. I am incredibly sick and tired of vulnerable women in prison being pushed aside. There should be no men in women's prisons, including prison officers. This ends the first portion of my presentation. I do have links to everything that I referred to, and I'll put those in the chat at the end, so that women can look further into that information if they'd like to, because I do know I've shared some heavy information here. So yeah, it's I'll share all that in a moment. So as many of you do know, we had Women's Action Group held our Speakers Corner demonstration in Melbourne today. Michelle is our amazing MC. She was hoping to make it tonight, Jennifer, she will, and one of the co-founders. And I helped organize the demonstrations and am the head marshal and lead the marshal team. Our wonderful marshal team. I'll spend the last few minutes just kind of going through how it was today from my perspective. We did have hostile detractors. They promoted the event online and did, in my views, try to incite people to come along and drown us out with noise and oppose us. And they did come out. We liaised with police consistently leading up to the event and you know, shared any risks or threats that we thought that there might be. From our point of view, the police response today was satisfactory. They did a very good job from our point of view at keeping separation between the groups and allowing everyone that stayed within the boundaries of the law to gather, as is our right to do so. Even if we don't agree with the people that are there, it is our right to gather and demonstrate publicly. And from our point of view, the police did a good job at allowing people to do that as long as we stayed within the bounds of the law. There were, from my count, approximately 100 police officers on site. And I didn't do a loose count of our attendees, but I would say we had at least a solid 50, and there possibly might have been more. There have been a couple of arrests reported, 2 or 3, and none of which, to my knowledge, were any of the people that attended to support the Speaker's Corner demonstration. And overall, we had a safe and successful event. So from my point of view, that's what we go to do. And we had some good speakers. Yeah, it was hectic and loud. But yeah, again, from my point of view, the women and attendees were safe and the speakers got to speak. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you for that little update there. And thank you for your gutting and enraging work on prisons. Thank you for taking that on at the last minute for me. I really appreciate it. It just really goes to show that we shouldn't have men in women's prisons. Like, when that's what happens with someone who's supposed to be in authority and supposed to be cleared and safe to be around women, but we're also putting convicted rapists in the cells with women. I'm staggered. So thank you so much to our speakers, Gina and Bronwyn Winter and Jess Williams. Thank you.